you write me off? Allow me to introduce you to what you thought you knew. Thought you found my dark side. Well, let me shed a little light. Your arrogance is vile, transparent, you can't hide. You've run out of time. Corner in love, warning before the light. Judging what you think you see, watching you, watching me, blinded in your mind. I'm not making me. You're invited to invade. Pull the ring on your grenade. See how far you get. See how fast you fade out. See how fast you fade out.
Oh gosh, that intro gave me chills. So good. Hey, what's going on? You know who I am and you know what time it is. Before we get into that though, I know some of you are probably wondering where I've been and what I've been up to the last couple weeks that I've been missing in action on here. And considering that usually me being absent for an extended period of time is indicative that something is wrong, I thought I'd take a moment to alleviate any concerns. For starters, I spent part of my time off keeping busy reconnecting with people who I hadn't seen in several years, which was very nice. I got to do some traveling, enjoy a small mini vacation, and relax with some new scenery. So there's that. I also spent time searching for a new theme song to revamp and edit the show intro for the remainder of this season. Mostly because I wanted to, really. Nobody told me I couldn't, so yeah. Did that. Also spent some time thinking about stuff to do for the future, which is why I've got a special announcement at the end of the show that some of you might like. But mostly I've just been living life, and it feels pretty refreshing. And then I figured I'd do a show for you all because there's never a shortage of things to talk about. And more importantly, I love doing this. And I hope you enjoy tuning in. So let's get to it. It's time for another point of view. Happening now. Sort of. This is as real a topic as I can cover on this show, listeners. Because this is a global issue. Doesn't matter what country you live in, it's happening. Right now, whether you know it or not. It's happening in places like Turkey, Russia, the United Kingdom, China, the United States of America, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, North Korea, Israel, and many others. What issue am I talking about? Censorship. Yeah, you heard me right. Censorship. It is the organized act of suppressing or prohibiting an individual's or a collective group of individuals' right to express themselves because them doing so is deemed to be obscene, politically unacceptable, or a threat to security. Censorship comes in all forms, and you have probably seen it in action before at some point or another in your life. You ever see a movie clip on television of someone talking, and then suddenly, even though you see their mouth moving, the audio momentarily cuts while they're saying something? Or perhaps instead of hearing them say a word, you hear this sound instead? Well, that's censorship. For you internet types out there, let me use a less dated reference. Have you ever searched for a picture online of someone in the nude and been met with picture results where the person's privates are covered with a solid, edited-in black bar? Or they've been pixelated and or blurred? Not only is it annoying, it's also censorship. And sure, those examples are pretty harmless and actually rather ridiculous. And censorship can be rather ridiculous at times. For instance, in one of the Die Hard movies, when it was aired on television, some channels changed one of the final lines of the movie from "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker" to "Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon," which made no sense in any context of the film. And yeah, that's actually so stupid it's kind of funny. And I wish censorship, when discussed as an issue in the 21st century, could just be a joke like these examples I'm giving you. But censorship, especially in the regard I'm talking about, is not a laughing matter. It's not a joke when a country's government jails reporters because the factual story they're putting out there is portraying the government in a negative light. It's not okay to shut down someone's presence across several social media platforms just because you don't like what they're saying. It's definitely not acceptable to imprison people for simply expressing their point of view on social media. And it should always be denounced whenever a government kills people for non-violently protesting a development in that nation. That's the ugly side of censorship. And unfortunately, as I mentioned before, even with the vast array of government types in the world, all of them are susceptible to doing it. Democracies, republics, dictatorships, or monarchies. And I don't care if saying any of this gets me censored. I'm calling them out. Let's start with Russia, a country whose president is essentially an authoritarian dictator. Vladimir Putin is a former Soviet KGB agent. If anybody knows how to silence opposition and keep people quiet, it's him. He served as president from 2000 to 2008, took a brief stint as prime minister from 2008 to 2012, though honestly, he was practically still in charge during those years. And he has once again been serving as president of Russia since 2012. In these past 18 years, since Putin took the highest public office in Russia, several of his and his ruling comrades' biggest critics domestically, especially in journalism, have been killed or brutally attacked. In 2006, a journalist by the name of Anna Politkovskaya was shot dead in her apartment block. She was best known for her critical coverage of the Russian war in Chechnya. And she wrote a book. And you know who she criticized a lot in that book? Vladimir Putin. The 5 men who killed her were convicted, but the government was never willing to go after the people who ordered the attack. Then you have Mikhail Beketov, the founder and editor of a Nikol newspaper in Russia. He wrote about corruption in a town where a highway project valued at $8 billion was responsible for destruction of local forests, and also talked about how local officials were secretly profiting from the highway project. In November 2008, Beketov was viciously beaten in an attack that left him suffering brain damage. He also lost a leg and was left unable to speak. He was in a coma for several months after the attack and spent more than 2 years in hospitals. He died 5 years later after the attack, and his attackers were never found. It's a common story in Russia. A journalist upsets the powers that be in the government and ends up dead or severely beaten. You have cases like Anastasia Barbarova, a freelance journalist who was shot and killed in 2009 on the sidewalk in central Moscow, alongside a human rights lawyer who worked on cases related to the Russian abuses in Chechnya. Or Oleg Kashin, another reporter who was attacked outside his house by 2 unidentified suspects in 2010, after writing a critical story about Andrei Turchak, then governor of the province of Pskov. The government probe to find out who was behind the attack stalled, and to this day, he still has not seen justice served. Or Kazimura Kamalov, the founder of a newspaper in the North Caucasus region of Russia, known for being critical of authorities. He was gunned down outside his office in the capital of Dagestan in 2011. It's no surprise reporters critical of the Russian government have fled the country over the last couple of years. It's not safe to voice a dissenting opinion, and they will silence you. Hell, look no further than the story of Arkady Babchenko, who after serving in the Russian army during 2 wars, became a journalist. He was a critic of the Russian government, and in February 2017, fled the country fearing for his life. And he even faked his own death in Ukraine with the help of Kiev officials for the sake of trying to track down the people he believed were trying to kill him. This is someone who experienced military combat, and even he was afraid of what the government would do to him for his dissent in the media. And even when they're outside of the country of Russia, dissenters and reporters find themselves still susceptible to being targeted. Last month in August, 3 Russian journalists were reported to have been killed in the Central Africa Republic while filming a documentary about the Russian government's interests in the country's uranium, gold, and diamond mines, as well as investigating the Wagner Group, which is a Russian firm of private military contractors. And before anyone says, now hold on, Africa is a rather dangerous place, this might not have been the Russian government's doing, the televised statement by the Central African Republic spokesman said the 9 men who gunned down the 3 journalists did not speak French or Sango. Those are the 2 main languages spoken in the country. In other words, the people who gunned them down were probably foreigners, maybe mercenaries. How incredibly convenient for the Russian government and the Wagner Group that these journalists were just gunned down while filming a documentary that would paint them in a negative light. But I can't spend a whole episode just talking about Russia. When it comes to censorship, like I said, it's happening all over the world on different levels. Just take a look at the country of Turkey, where after a failed coup attempt in July 2016 by military officers that resulted in the deaths of 250 civilian protesters, for the past 2 years, the government of Turkey has had more than 50,000 people arrested and 150,000 others sacked or suspended from their jobs. We're talking university professors, writers, teachers, cartoonists, activists, basically the people in society that guide the intellectual and moral discourse within Turkish society. Or as Turkey's president would rather call them, terrorists. But let's give credit where credit is due to Turkey. At least their president and their government doesn't kill journalists. No, the Turkish government instead has them imprisoned and locked away. And if they die in Turkish prison during their wrongful imprisonment, well, that's on them. Shouldn't have been reporting the news. Just last March, 25 journalists were convicted of membership to the group blamed for the failed coup attempt. 23 of them were convicted of prison terms of up to 7.5 years. The other 2 were convicted of lesser charges. That's how censorship works in Turkey. Don't like what a journalist is saying or reporting on? Put them in prison. But why stop with just journalists and reporters for expressing themselves? Let's just target regular people. Well, look no further than the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That's right, kingdom. You thought pseudo-democracies that are really just dictatorships do censorship in the 21st century? Oh no, this crosses government types all over. And monarchies, which for some reason still exist in this day and age, do it too. So yeah, Saudi Arabia, aside from being another country that arrests journalists and bloggers whenever they write or say something that doesn't sit well with their ruling government, the country also has what it calls the Commission for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. I kid you not, this is a real government agency in Saudi Arabia. It's basically their morality police. This agency goes after people, usually women, and investigates or arrests them for things like dressing incorrectly in public. That's right. Back in July of last year, after a video surfaced on Snapchat of a woman walking around the capital city of Riyadh in a crop top and a miniskirt, Twitter in Saudi Arabia started seeing several Saudi citizens call for her arrest. And then she was actually arrested. True story. Links in the description. This is the part where someone might chime in. Yeah, but not every country is a monarchy, or a country pretending to be a democracy that's actually run by some dictator. There are plenty of democracies and republics out there whose governments don't imprison and kill journalists or activists. To which I say, tell that to the guys like Julian Assange. You might know him as the founder of WikiLeaks, otherwise known as the guy who helped reveal the truth about the Iraq War in the mid-2000s, or more recently, revealing how the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency taps into consumer electronic devices to spy on people. Or perhaps tell that to Edward Snowden, the guy who spilled the beans about the National Security Agency, better known as the NSA, which Snowden revealed was spying on American citizens and foreigners alike and keeping records of their private conversations. I mean, sure, they weren't arrested by the U.S. government, but that's because one of them has been under asylum in Ecuador for years now, and the other one ended up in Russia. But sure, for the sake of fairness, Let's stop going after the low-hanging fruit that is the dictators, theocracies, and monarchies of the world, and instead turn our attention to other societies that don't necessarily fit this mold, but still do censorship. Let's discuss the United States of America. After all, it is the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The government shall not infringe upon the right to free speech, freedom of press, and the right to assembly. But hey, why would the government go after reporters when they're all bought and owned by corporations and advertisers? Most journalists in American mainstream media just report whatever line is fed to them by a government official or member of the intelligence community anyway. A lot of the real hard-hitting American journalism today happens from smaller independent outlets in new media that generally doesn't appear on television. And when it comes to having to deal with these journalists, why have to bother to imprison you when they can easily have the social media companies shut you down for them? Just ask most content creators on YouTube what it's like to have your videos demonetized and the source of your livelihood attacked because your content was deemed offensive. Yeah, that's right. I'm referring to adpocalypse, as it was so affectionately called back in 2017. By the way, that never really went away. YouTube still blacklists and shadow bans some content. And I have little to no doubt I'll be seeing some backlash from them thanks to this video. Shout out to Alphabet Incorporated and their algorithms, which I'm sure will totally not bury this video and hide it from you. Yeah. But it's not just YouTube that has jumped on the censorship train. Look no further than the recent case of Alex Jones. That's right, that wacky guy from InfoWars. Ask him what it's like to one day find yourself banned from YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Spotify, all within less than 24 hours. Or ask TJ Kirk, also known as the Amazing Atheist, who was banned from Twitter for a joke. Ask anyone that's ever been disinvited from speaking at a university where the United States of America has a censorship problem. But actually, that is unfair to Americans. Other supposedly free Western societies also use social media companies to help them deal with speech they don't like. Just ask the British, or the Germans, or the Canadians. I could go on, but I think you get the point. But hey, at least it's better than living in China. And I'm not just saying that because sometimes the air over there is dangerous to breathe in. I'm actually referring to the fact that China's ruling party and government doesn't just imprison people or simply mess with the algorithms on search engines so the content is given a lower priority in the search results. Instead, it just outright makes sure you never see that content. Ever. How? By getting with tech companies like Google or cell phone providers to ban certain content from appearing at all in the search results, even in other countries. Now that's censorship on a whole other level right there. So what are my thoughts on all of this? Well, I think I've made it very clear where I stand on this issue while covering the facts. I mean, I can't call my show Another Point of View if I'm in favor of censorship, which, by definition, is the very act of preventing others from expressing their own point of view. But honestly, imprisoning members of the press, censoring their content on the internet and various other media platforms, or just straight up having them killed. Listeners, I have wanted to talk about the threat censorship poses to the world since the start of this year, and I always put it off. But I realized recently during my hiatus that I couldn't put it off any longer. You can't have an honest, open world when some people aren't allowed to have a voice. When your life can be turned upside down or outright ended by people in positions of power because you had the courage to express yourself or your views or expose their lies to others, censorship is how the government stifles dissent and manufactures consent. It's how the truth dies. Listeners, regardless of what country you live in, and whether you agree or disagree with the people being silenced or censored, you can't stay quiet and just let it happen. As the saying goes, the only thing for evil to prevail is for the good people to do nothing. But hey, that's just my opinion. And my opinion, after all, is just another point of view. Okay, so for the sake of driving home the point that the previous segment and topic is important to me, I want this to be a one-segment show. I know, that's not the usual format, but it's my show, guys. I will make it up to you. Which brings me to the special announcement I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Starting in October, which means roughly 1 month from now, all the way into the rest of the year of 2018, I'm bringing back another point of view Q&A. Woo! I had a great time doing it last year. I look forward to doing it this year. So yeah, if you've got a question you want me to answer, or have a past host on the show answer, send it to me. That applies to previous hosts as well. If they want to submit a question for me or someone else, they're more than welcome to submit it. You have all the time of this year left to send the questions over. I look forward to seeing what you all come up with. And don't worry, I'll still be doing the regular show for the rest of September. I know I went MIA in August after my last video. Again, I'm doing great. Thank you for your continued support. And unless YouTube decides to ban me for this video, see you next time, and take care for now.
Sleep with one eye open, but it's gotta be on. Your ignorance isn't hard, so act alarmed, I'm broken. Judging what you think you see, watching you, watching me, blinded in your mind. I'm not right or making me, nor invited to invade. Pull the ring on your grenade. Let's see how far you get. Let's see how fast you fade out.
Okay, so this person is never going to listen to this show, and she has no idea I even do this, despite the fact that she's a big part of my life. But I wanted to take a moment to wish her a happy birthday on here. She doesn't know it, but I really do care about her. And in case she is listening, I'll say it in a way she'll understand. Feliz cumpleaños. Te quiero mucho.